Well, I do like to read slash fiction. I prefer the various same gender pairings because of my own life and interests. That resonates more with me, and I tend to like stories that have a little more depth. I mean, I'm not necessarily just, it's not the smut, so to speak. I like the interactions, and I like stories where people have to have some personal growth, you know, and they come through stuff, and I do like AUs, obviously, alternate universes, because none of the characters other than Albus are gay in canon, but I like examining different possibilities of what can happen. Well, my favorite is Harry Draco. I tend to not like cross-generational pairings as much, so I'm not really into Snape and Harry. A lot of people are, but I don't like that as much. I read some Ron Draco, although at one point I thought I would never read that. I thought that sounds absurd, but then I read one, and you know, and a well-written story can make something that you would never have thought possible sort of make sense or work, you know, and it can examine a way that characters can go from their antagonistic relationship in the books to changing and growing, and that's what we do, is we all change and grow. So I read those, and then, you know, I mean, I've read Seamus and Dean, and I'm not somebody who says, oh, they have to be a particular pairing or it won't work. I mean, I'm willing to try different pairings. I do read some of the femme slash pairings, but there aren't as many ones of those that I've really enjoyed. I've read several that involved Luna. I read and this is sort of cross-generational, so it's kind of different, but I've read it was actually a Harry Draco story, but there was also a relationship between Tonks and Ginny, which was really interesting, and Tonks was a little younger than some of them. I mean, she wasn't old enough to be Ginny's mother, so that didn't feel quite as weird. It's not that there's anything wrong with big age differences. I mean, in real life, my sister is, I think, 14 years younger than my brother-in-law, which is not quite old enough to be her father, but it's a fairly significant age difference. So it's not that that's a problem once you get old enough that, I mean, when you're a teenager, that kind of age difference is enormous. But once you're 30 and 45, it's not that big a deal. It's just that it doesn't resonate with me to see Snape and Harry together. Which isn't to say that I don't read it, it's just that it's not my preference. Yeah, and ironically, it was fanfic that kind of got me. I read fanfic before I read the books, the first fanfic, because I resisted getting involved in Harry Potter for a long time. I mean, initially, it was because it was this huge mass market phenomenon, and I wasn't going to get into that. You know, I mean, I was traumatized as a child by the whole Cabbage Patch doll thing that I couldn't have because we couldn't afford it, and I'm suspicious of mass market phenomenon. But enough of phenomena, I guess I should say. A number of my friends and family read it and said, you would really like this. And then I said, well, but I see all these people, and they stay up all night to go to movies, premieres, and they do all this stuff, and you know, I don't want to be sucked into it and spend all night, so I'm going to wait until all of the books and movies have come out, and then I'll read them all and watch all the movies. But I caved. I caved a little bit after Half-Blood Prince had been released, the book, and I even already knew the big spoiler at the end. I had read that in the press because I wasn't waiting to read it, so it didn't matter. And I read those, and I got completely hooked. But what prompted me to finally read them were two things. One of them was that a really good friend of mine asked me to help her make some Slytherin costume stuff for Witching Hour, which was a convention that happened in Boston several years ago. And she wanted a set of Slytherin dress robes. She wanted help altering a skirt to be a different length. And I also knitted her a sweater vest. I made her these green velvet and gray silk lining robes. But she was is blind. So she couldn't tell me the cut of the robes, you know, what type of sleeves there were, what type of hood there was. So I had to go online to look for reference pictures. And I was like, wow, this looks really interesting. And then I was at a science fiction convention, Aresia, and there was an author who was reading her work, and at the end of her reading, she said, can I read you a Snape Harry short story? And she did. And I thought, this is fascinating. And of course that didn't end up being the pairing that I liked, but I thought, wow, I gotta go read more of this. And so I looked at a little bit of fan fiction, and ironically, it wasn't, some of it wasn't very good, but it was enough to get me interested. And then I read the books, and then I started reading more fan fiction. And then I saw the movies, and then I stayed up all night for the book release party, and I stayed up all night for the last movie party, and I'm gonna stay up all night for the next two, and I'm coming to conventions. So, and I've done art, and I do knitting, and so on. So it gets you hooked.